Welcome back to the Lucky Orange Show. On today's episode, we're talking all about the Shopify app marketplace and the ecosystem. It's a topic that's near and dear to the team at Lucky Orange because we've had a great relationship with Shopify over the years for new customer acquisition and awareness and all sorts of things. But I've got a lot of questions about how the ecosystem is working and what makes a successful app, how to publish, how to promote, and all that. So that's why we've brought in a Shopify app marketplace expert, Deb Mecca, today. Deb, how are you? Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. For those of you that don't know, Lucky Orange was one of my first discoveries in the Shopify App Store early on when I was in the development side. And so they've been kind of one of my favorite apps for the last 8 to 10 years. Yeah, I think I've been around.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So we'll also kind of set the scene here. Deb is one of the founders of the App Collective, which is a weekly newsletter that gives amazing top-notch tips to help Shopify apps succeed within this ecosystem that we're getting ready to talk about. Also through Causeway 305, basically a fractional CMO for Shopify app developers. So you're in the weeds. And as we were talking about before we joined today, you're also an online e-commerce business owner yourself with the Love Sweets Candy Shop. So you are truly, truly in it when it comes to the Shopify app ecosystem. This morning I was looking and at a cursory glance, this fact may be outdated, but I saw that there's somewhere north of 10 apps on the Shopify App Store these days. With such a large number, not all of them are successful. Some of them fail miserably. Some of them are runaway successes. And I'm hoping we can kind of start there. If you could run through maybe a few key factors that can contribute to a Shopify app succeeding within the Shopify App Store.
Yeah, there are a lot more apps than ever before because of Shopify really opening up the floodgates for developers to be able to get in there and make a name for themselves, which is really exciting. I think with that fact, we should also point out the fact that there is still a ton of opportunity. There are 4 million live Shopify stores and counting as well. So as the number of apps grow, the number of merchants also grow. Now, all things are not really, created equally. And so there's a lot of maybe not the best apps, and there's also maybe not the best stores. But when the numbers number, there's still just a lot of room for a lot of apps to succeed. And so there are some things that can contribute to success, at least from my vantage point. I probably will be leaving a few things out, but I think Built for Shopify is, the most recent opportunity for apps to gain some notoriety or credibility within the App Store. And I think Shopify is going to continue to push apps in that direction, and it makes sense. So if you aren't built for Shopify, maybe start to try to prioritize getting there at some point.
Can you explain what you mean by that? With Built for Shopify? I'm loosely aware of that, but could you explain that?
So they have Polaris. I mean, I'm not like I'm not technical or anything, but they have it's built on the framework of Polaris. And so when you're built for Shopify, your ed is embedded within the app, the Shopify ecosystem instead of being outside of it. And so there's a lot of rules that you have to follow to gain that notoriety or that badge. And I don't know all the rules, but little things like there's certain color scheme, there's certain fonts, like you have to kind of look as a part of Shopify. And then there's, different rules and parameters that are beyond me that you have to fall within. So I think what happened was a lot of apps were in Shopify embedded, and then they went outside of it for various reasons. And so now they're kind of like, oh crap, now I got to get back in there. But I think it's worth it. So and Shopify is definitely recognizing apps that have that badge. And I think it builds some credibility as well with merchants because it feels more cohesive. It feels like, it doesn't feel disjointed. It feels like it's part of the platform that they're paying all this money to be a part of. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's basically a social proof point, just like anything else where on websites and any sort of badge you can get, especially from the platform that you're on, which is Shopify. So that makes total sense.
So another factor I would say is like making sure that you're having consistent positive reviews. And I think, again, like with the social proof or the credibility, like not all reviews are created equally. You see a lot
Totally.
of reviews that are like, been using the app for an hour, and they say like good so far. It's like, I don't think that carries as much weight as this revolutionized my business and changed it in this kind of way, and here's why. And I've been using the app now for the past 3+ months. I think that carries a little more weight. Now with Shopify, they want to see consistent reviews, so getting
Hmm.
the it works so far is probably okay for Shopify. um, but for a marketer like me, I want to see it more. I want to see more.
When it comes to
Um,
getting those reviews, I think there's a few different situations that people fall in. They're running and they've got a lot of reviews coming in. They may be getting a series of negative reviews, but there's also the people who are just getting started from zero that may not have figured out how to even begin that flow of reviews. What are some tips you might have for people to work that into their workflows in the appropriate spot? Like you mentioned, there are some reviews that show up and it's like, well, I haven't really used it yet, but sure, I'll give you 5 stars. And within the app ecosystem, it's still valuable to get that 5 stars. But are there any kind of tips that you might give people to say, either to control a stream of negative reviews or to get going with starting to gain more reviews?
I think it's all about the relationship. So if you're there and you're doing live chat support and you're getting in with them right away when they're having a problem, it's like there's nothing more frustrating than you having an issue with a SaaS product and then having to go through like their Zendesk and wait days. And by then you're already
Mm-hmm.
like, onto something else. And so now you're getting an email from them, you're being interrupted by whatever it is that you're working on. And now that I'm on the merchant side, I can really relate to this because it's just like, I want my problem solved now. Thank you very much. And because I'm
Right.
thinking about this right now, or I need to pass this hurdle to get through it, to get somewhere. So I think that goes a long way. And if you can help them solve that problem quickly and you go above and beyond, then it makes, in the flow of things, it makes sense for you to be like, okay, well, can you share with other merchants what just happened? And
Mm-hmm.
here's a link to go ahead and do that. And so it just has to feel authentic and it has to feel worthwhile, like you deserved to get there.
Right, right. Yeah. Natural within the flow of things. And it feels like you may even get something out of leaving the review. And there are I don't know that Shopify allows necessarily incentivized reviews like some other platforms do.
No, they don't.
Which
Yeah.
yeah, keeps it clean, keeps it, above board.
But
Makes it more
also,
difficult.
if you're a newer app, you have to kind of think in the perspective of like, well, if they get more positive reviews that I'm helping them get to, then they're going to continue to grow, which means they're going to continue to build out this product that I've now become reliant on for my business. And
Mhm.
therefore, there's some sticky legs here and longevity. So we're all kind of like working together to keep this going.
Yeah. You mentioned that there's an extremely high number of Shopify stores and it keeps growing with the visibility of Shopify as a platform. And there is opportunity within the app marketplace for somebody who's just getting into this that says, I think that my entrepreneurial spirit is taking me towards Shopify app development. I may be developing apps elsewhere or might just be getting into this for the first time. What would you tell somebody when they're looking to spot an opportunity in the marketplace? Is it really looking at the competitive landscape? Is it finding an underserved need? Where would people kind of head to find an opportunity for a new Shopify app?
Yeah, I mean, so some of my favorite friends like built their apps because one of two things happened. They were in the forums and they were reading, they were bored one day, and because they're developers, they were like, hey, let me go spin up an opportunity or like help someone out today. And then they start building this thing and they can start problem solving for that. And then all of a sudden they have an app. you know
Yeah,
I mean, it gets more involved than that, but it does
sure.
snowball in that way. I mean, I think about like Zapier, like Andrew, that's literally how he built Zapier. um, and then and then you've got like people on the development side that are building stores, and then their client needs something that isn't available in an app or isn't available in native Shopify, and so they start building this thing, and then another client needs it, and then another client needs it, and they're like, you know
Hmm.
what, let's make this wider spread because there's a bigger need here. And so those I love. Those aren't like the the guys that are out there that are like, how can I become rich and like Shopify is this like great land of
Right.
opportunity. Like, let me figure out how to become rich quick. And then they like steal people's code and like do all of that shady stuff.
Hmm.
So I like the ones that are like, I see a need and I'm trying to figure out how to solve for that. And here I go on this journey to get there.
Yeah. Even with, I mean, that makes total sense. The organic development of something to fill a need, or like you mentioned, something is already being built and used, it might benefit others. Let's put it on the Shopify app store. With all of that, there's also challenges that come about, and the competition is pretty great out there. And what are some current challenges you see people having when it comes to maybe they've gotten the app published and they're running on the store? What are some challenges that you see for people facing within the ecosystem right now?
I mean, there's a number of challenges. Like, I think one is feature creep. So they build something
Mm,
because they're like nerdy developers and love doing it. And then all of a sudden they like get this other idea and they get this other idea. And they're off to the races in like 20 different directions instead of just focusing on the one thing, perfecting it, making it, getting the feedback loop from customers, figuring out what they want and need and building from that, and then continuing to kind of iterate off of that. And so I've seen that happening a few times. Or they built this like super niche app that no one really, there's no real demand for. And it's
sure.
great, but you've just now like wasted a lot of time because no one really, it's just not mature enough in its need. And then it's not discoverable. And so if your app isn't discoverable with 10,000 plus apps, it's going to be really hard unless you're really good at networking and you've got agency partnerships that see the need for it and start, bringing all their clients into it. It's going to be a struggle. You're going to be on the struggle bus for sure.
I do want to talk about discoverability and marketing when it comes to Shopify apps. But I do have a question. You mentioned feature creep. Would you advise somebody who's having success with an individual Shopify app that says, I think that this could also do X? Would you advise them to evaluate that idea as potentially a completely separate app and spin up a second app, or really just say, hold on, let's focus on the core functionality? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have a client right now who a very large agency who has really great clients, like needs a specific thing. And in
Mm-hmm.
that case, I'm like, do it because I just feel like that's going to be a huge opportunity, not only with those couple of customers that need that specific thing, but also like starting to develop the relationship with this really great agency that has great
Sure.
clients. So there's that piece. But then I guess it depends. I mean, if it's like a wonky thing that seems ridiculous, like we sort of just have to figure out like who else is doing it? Are you going to be doing it better if it becomes its own
Mm-hmm.
separate app? Or is there something that we could do with it within your current app that makes perfect sense, that it's not going to take a lot of time or resources or whatever? And do enough clients of yours need it? And how are they going to be using it? Or is it just going to be this like extra limb hanging out over here that feels weird? I worked on this one app years ago it was like one of those like 40 plus functions or whatever in
Sure.
one.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of really hard to gain traction in the app store, like in the ads portion of it, because the algorithm just couldn't figure out how to optimize around all these like disparate keywords. So you have to kind of think about it from that perspective too. Does this make sense? And am I going in like, am I becoming a Walmart? And if the
Mm.
answer is I'm becoming a Walmart, like, is there enough demand for that where I don't have to rely on the app store to get there?
Yeah.
So
I
I don't know.
mean, more is more. So as soon as it's just like a growing company, when you add a new feature to an app, when you add a new functionality, it's more to manage, it's more to support, it's more to optimize on the positive side of things. If people start actually using it, then it's something to pay attention to and optimize. So if you can handle it and you're growing and it makes sense, I think you're right. It really depends on, does this make sense? Does this add value to the people that wanted the core functionality? Does this make sense? Or is this just something that you know how to build?
And it's also like back to the community aspect of things, like get the feedback loop from your existing customer base. Ask
Mm-hmm.
them, would you use this? How would you use this? Would you pay extra for it? A series of questions to really understand like the people that are actually using my app right now that love it, would this be weird to them? Or would
Mm-hmm.
this be a benefit to them? And then kind of go from there.
Yeah, totally.
Don't just build it because you want to, because you can. That's,
Right. Right. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think people do gain confidence when they have success with something. They say, I nailed that. I hit the ICP, I hit the product market fit, whatever. I know what I'm doing now. Let's just go for it. But ultimately, it could be a waste of time and money, and send your app that's otherwise functioning at a really high level spiraling.
Yeah, it's like Lucky Orange isn't trying to be anything other than what it is. And it's kind of like even me, like I only work Shopify apps. I'm not trying to be everything to everyone. Like I'm very zeroed in on what I do. And there's enough opportunity for me to do that. And so I'm just going to only do that. Like I've had people come to me and been like, hey, would you work on BigCommerce or would you do this or that? And like, nope, nope. Like we draw the line. I'm not chasing the money. I'm chasing like the focus. And so I think apps should do that as well.
And there's plenty of work to be done with Shopify. There's plenty of apps,
Yeah.
and like we've mentioned, plenty of stores. And you did mention earlier that the clarity in that positioning and the clarity in what you are and what you do helps with visibility for the Shopify algorithm, for the search algorithm, and other Shopify ads as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? How to gain visibility, maybe with a new app or one that's succeeding? And I'm mainly curious about the role that traditional marketing plays in this, because it's one thing to show up in the Shopify search results. And it's another thing related to that to show up with Shopify ads. But how do you market a Shopify app to the right audience and to the right people?
Yeah. I mean, I do believe I'm a full life cycle marketer. And so Shopify App Store is definitely bottom of funnel as you can potentially get,
Sure.
especially if you have some kind of like you're good at making the listing SEO optimized and you're getting those reviews. And even if you're even somehow getting on a case study on the homepage, like that's like the holy grail, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, but getting your app trending somehow, like any way that you can get visibility within that bottom of funnel area is going to be hugely important. But at the same time, let's not stop there. Like you should also be building your website and making that a machine that will work for you and not against you. And then finding people within the various levels of that funnel, whether it's in the initial discovery all the way down to we're ready to buy and everything in between. And so that should be, working in the background. And then I'm a full believer in doing all kinds of organic things. So partnerships, like I said, I mean, I started on the development side and I was the one helping my clients discover apps. They would come to me and say, hey, I want to do this thing. What do you recommend? And then I'd go and like
Mm.
figure it out for them. And that's how I discovered Lucky Orange and, became the love of my life. So I think that's, you should always be kind of in the background working on other things that are ancillary to the bottom of the funnel while you're continuing to optimize for the bottom of the funnel. And so, when I see apps that haven't updated their media gallery in a year, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Or haven't touched their listing, haven't played around testing anything, haven't played around testing pricing. People just like park and they think that they're there to stay, and then they're upset with Shopify for changing their algorithm or upset with Shopify for not giving them opportunity. It's like, but what are you doing? Like, take some
Mhm.
ownership here, people, and you should be constantly working on optimizing that for better results. Also, like, I'm a big believer in like video. So I truly believe that you should be building like bridges and tunnels and different things to like get people to discover you in some kind of way. So it doesn't have to be like the most produced videos. I think if you have like a very strong accent and a crappy background and really bad audio, you should probably work on that or get
Mhm.
AI to do the work for you. But producing consistent video on YouTube, for instance, is a really good channel, or producing reels on Instagram or TikTok consistently would be another channel to test and stay consistent with.
Yeah.
So things like that should always be happening along with the Shopify App Store.
So you want to develop your website to create clicks through to your Shopify app listing. You want to build out social media accounts to gain awareness, but also to explain what you do and maybe how you relate to competitors and how you help people, and to get that visibility out there. We're not, as you know, we're not Shopify only, so we're pretty platform agnostic. We're all over the place. Our brand awareness push has been kind of one of our main focuses over the past, going on 6 months now, and we've talked a lot about like things like founder brand, and that's just one example of strategies to deploy. I think, I guess the question is, do you see that happening with Shopify app developers who
Yeah.
may lean towards being more technical? Would you encourage somebody who may push back on that a little bit to say, look, you being visible adds a human element to your app. It kind of helps to build one of my forbidden words, which would be quote unquote brand. But yeah, how do you view the visibility of the app developer and the founder and whoever it might be?
I mean, it's huge. Like, I can even go back as far as the early days of me being on Twitter. And I
Mm,
remember telling somebody that worked at Shopify at the time, that don't work there anymore, but I was like, let me train like your staff on how to get on Twitter, because nobody's on there. And I really think Shopify should have a huge presence on there. And as
right.
soon as Toby and Harley really started like championing and talking and becoming extremely visible, like the floodgates, I mean, things were already okay for them. Let's
Hmm.
not let's not um,
Hmm.
underplay that. But I think really that changed the game for them. And so I think thinking it from it, you always want to model your masters. And so thinking about it from like, what does Shopify do? And how can
Right.
I, even though I'm one guy with only one developer, like how do I then emulate some of those things that have worked really, really well? So I've been lucky. I mean, most of my clients are developers and they are introverted, but they're not afraid to try stuff. Like if I ask them to do something, they're like, okay, like I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone. Like I suggested a podcast to one of my developer guys and I was like, I already pushed send. I gave your name to them, and they were like, it was already hard to do the YouTube videos, but I guess like we're going to do this thing. So I think as soon as you try anything, it becomes a lot easier. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So
Yeah,
if you're going to
totally.
become a founder and you're going to do that leap of faith and take a chance in yourself, then you're really going to take a chance in yourself, right?
Right.
So,
That makes me think about how the life cycle of a Shopify app could go. You could have an idea and be building it, and then you catch some success. At what point do you advise people to take on either some outsourced resources or secondary, employees basically to help them grow? Are there initial needs that you say once you've hit a certain number of installs, you need to have customer service person or some sort of outsource? What does that journey look like to expand what would turn into a company?
well, I will always tell developers that they need to prioritize development, because the minute you stop developing your product, you're getting behind the competition, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
And so if you can't continue on that hamster wheel, it reaches a point where customer service becomes taking up more of your time than the development side of it. Then that's when you need to start really kind of evaluating opening up the floodgates of resource. And it has to make financial sense as well. So I
Hmm.
don't know what that I don't think that I couldn't say, okay, once you reach this many installs, like let's start leveling up. It's, are you being pulled so far into another direction that you're not developing the product? And then what does that look like financially, and how can we make it work?
Right. Especially as with Shopify, they have so many releases that come out and they say for you to maintain on the platform, you need to change this security protocol or this development language or whatever. It feels like even if you get going and you see success, you have to know that a lot of your time, some percentage of your time will be spent just maintaining, not even optimizing your app, just existing within the platform. And we've seen that with our app is they'll deliver a list of things that's like, hey, by this date, this has to be done. And we automatically prioritize that because we know if we're not in the app store, nobody can download our app and nobody can install Lucky Orange through Shopify. So you're totally right that like that has to come first in the pecking order.
Yeah, and if you're getting pulled away, or you're just only adhering to Shopify's ever changing, demanding requirements of you, and you're not continuing to build out the product in a way that's more modern or more features, or listening to your customer feedback, like, I really need this, I need your app to do
Mm-hmm.
this, or whatever, then we got to evaluate what's happening here.
Yeah. Shopify does completely change all the time and has all these updates. I'm curious if there's anything that's been floating around or showing up more recently that you think people aren't paying enough attention to, that's going to be a much bigger deal in the coming months or years.
Are we talking like where do I see opportunity, or are we talking?
Any sort of trend that is happening within this ecosystem that people are undervaluing maybe in the short term or just not paying enough attention to?
Yeah. So it's no surprise that we see a lot of like upsell apps or bundle apps or things that are going to increase your AOV. That's like the huge thing, everything on the front end, right? But I think the unsung heroes are the guys that are in the back end, that there's just still a ton of opportunity to do stuff with. So we're talking like inventory forecasting. I mean, it's not that sexy, right? But like, it's going to become harder and harder the bigger that you get to be able to manage that. And so, those guys, they never show up on like the tech stacks that you see on Twitter or whatever, like all the bros talking about like they're the 5 apps in our tech stack. It's like, you never see like how to bulk edit products, in at scale or something like that. But like, obviously when you've got, hundreds upon hundreds of SKUs, you're going to need a way, and you're running a lot of sales throughout the year, you're going to need a way to be able to automate the process of bulk editing a bunch of products when you have a sale. Right. So things like that, be able to limit orders on products, I think is like another one. I know these are all sort of risks that Shopify might build into the platform later. But for now, I think they're kind of like the unsung heroes of the App Store that I think are really cool. I think CRO testing in general, like there's a lot of talk about like landing pages and, campaign specific this or that, but I don't know that it's really being tapped into enough, or that there's just like a better opportunity to really give some play to that, especially in the App Store, like on the Shopify side, like giving that its own area to thrive in. 2D, 3D interfaces, immersive shopping experiences, things along that, virtual shopping experiences. Like, I want to start moving into that. And I'm not, we're seeing some of it. Like, I think Drake did something last summer with Shopify collections. And so that went really cool. But then how to sort of jump into that pot. So like, you go to Drake's, Drake Related is his shop, right? It's really cool. But then you click on a product and it's out of stock and there's like a notify me, but like, why not turn that into a pre-order? Or, so I think that there's still like a lot of opportunity within that space to kind of collab together with traditional, or popular apps.
Yeah. This might fly in the face of something that we've mentioned earlier, but do you think there's an opportunity to not necessarily bundle by having multiple apps in one, but to provide a simplified solution for those more traditional things like upsells and the kind of app categories that exist, and say you could actually avoid talking to 10 different customer support teams by installing our app? That may already exist to some degree, but is there an opportunity you think, to do that really well still within the ecosystem?
I think agencies really try to work towards that.
Sure.
But I guess that's sort of the question, is like, how do apps become friends and work together to form those agency alliances so that when they're doing demos, they're doing it as a collective? That's what I tried to start with the App Collective when we, I first came up with the idea, but it's hard, it's hard with so many apps.
Truly. And I would say, ecosystem-led growth, as they call it, is something that we've been really, really pushing on. Being a smaller, scrappier group compared to some of our competitors, we are dependent on the audiences of other complementary solutions to say, hey, have you heard of Lucky Orange? We'll say, hey, have you heard of this email service or this third-party logistics that we have nothing to do with and we don't even integrate with, but it's a huge benefit to us to get in front of their audience. And then also for our audience, we know people that are running a store also need an email service. They also need a logistics solution. And so it really makes sense for us to sort of curate that relationship.
That's actually a very fair point, because you are an unsung hero behind the scenes that relies on. So I do have a client that same thing, like he should be partnering with email agencies because his product would work really, really well in that regard, or like ones that are running like Facebook ads at a huge scale that need, specific things for those campaigns. So yeah, there should be a lot of more of that happening, I would imagine.
One more question for you, and this can be Shopify related or really anything else. What has you most excited right now?
Well, a lot of things, but I think the big thing right now is it's never been easier for apps that are smaller to get in front of or develop relationships with some of these like high profile, like celebrity or high fashion accounts that are joining or jumping on the bandwagon of Shopify. So imagine a world where all of a sudden Beyonce installs your app, and you're
Yeah.
just like a 5-person team or a 20-person team, and it's like, holy crap. And it's completely attainable, or
Hmm.
like the Rock's new brand just randomly one day installed the app. I used to go through, like when I worked across 10 different Shopify apps, and I do this now with all of my clients too. I'm constantly like kind of going through their client list and looking for those like little opportunities. And like the geek in me just gets so excited when I see a brand that I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. And
Yeah.
then I try to figure out how I'm going to like leverage it to get more of them. But it's
Yeah.
it's fun. So I find that really exciting. Um, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, it is super exciting time to be around. And if you're out there listening and you are considering jumping in, or you're already a Shopify app and you want to grow, we will leave in the show notes links to one, follow along with the App Collective newsletter. It is really delightful, and it provides amazing tips on a weekly basis. But then also, if you want to work directly with Deb, we'll link down to Causeway. Maybe even we'll link to the candy store if you want to buy some amazing candy, some freeze-dried candy, which is such a cool idea. I can't leave without asking, how did that come about?
So I love TikTok, and I love like virtual shopping, live shopping, and all of that kind of stuff. Oh, that's another opportunity that I think is a huge opportunity for just the regular Joe, is to have their live shopping showing up on their website or their
Right.
e-commerce store, their Shopify store. But yeah, and I started seeing like the freeze dried candy, and I was like, I really want to jump into this. I think it's one thing to talk about the merchant experience when you work with apps, but really understanding it fully was like the next step in my evolution. I've been in the ecosystem for 10 years now, and I was just looking for the right thing. And the freeze dried candy business really, like, I love candy. I love the idea of like making something with some love. And so that's kind of the impetus of where it started. And it's been really fun. I've had lots of challenges, which I think helps me understand what merchants are going through on a daily basis now. They're reaching out to your app. It's like you see people complaining all the time about like the angry customer or the
Mm-hmm.
hard to deal with customer. And it's like, you don't know what their day has been like. You don't know that TikTok just took down a bunch of their products, which is their lifeline of gaining new revenue that day. And then your app is like getting all funky and interfering with other stuff too. And then they're having problems with like fulfillment or whatever that's happening in the background there. So they're being flooded with all kinds of stuff that's happening all at once. And if you can provide them with a delightful experience and a really just like a happy, that you just bring a smile to their face that day by just taking some piece of a load off, that really goes a long way. They'll remember that your app might not be the best in the entire space, but the fact that you gave them that touch really makes a huge difference, and you've gained a customer for life. So
Yeah.
knowing that on the side of being the merchant is really, really helping me on the app side. So it's been great.
It's amazing. It's super fun. Like I said, we'll leave links in the show notes for everything. Deb, thank you for carving out time. I know you're a busy person, so I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with myself and our audience today. Hopefully, everybody learned a lot about the Shopify App Store. If they want to connect with you online and hear about what more else you might have to say, where can they find you? What's the best platforms to be following you on?
Twitter or X, I guess, at Deb Mecca.
Awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Sean.